12 years. That's how long I waited for him to choose me the way I chose him. But the truth? He stopped choosing me long before I ever walked away. I gave him my youth, my loyalty, my love. And in return he gave her his heart. So I left, not because I stopped loving him but because I finally started loving myself. 12 years. That's how long I'd been entangled with Jace Bennett. In love, in waiting, in denial. But how many 12s do we even get in one lifetime? Jace, I had whispered earlier that day, voice calm even as my heart cracked in silence. Just as you wanted. I'm giving you back your freedom. Then I walked away. No screaming. No begging. No last glance. I didn't go home, our home. Instead, I checked into a quiet little hotel across the river. The air in the room was cold, the bed too firm, and the walls were sterile, but none of it mattered. I turned off my phone, pulled the curtains shut, and buried myself under the covers like a child hiding from monsters. Only the monsters had already been living beside me, sleeping in the same bed, calling me by name. I don't remember when I fell asleep. But in my dream I was 16 again. The year everything changed. The year I first met Jace. I remember standing in the lawyer's office, freshly orphaned and exhausted, blinking back tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed. My parents had died in a car crash 2 weeks earlier, and with their death came a flurry of people trying to claim custody over me. Not because they loved me. No, nothing so pure. But because whoever became my guardian would also gain control over the compensation money. People showed their true colors fast. My aunt called me heartless when I refused to move in. Can't you help out a little? We're family. My grandmother called me ungrateful. Your uncle took care of you when you were small. You've forgotten that. What they had forgotten was what they used to whisper behind my back. That I was cursed. That my very existence doomed my parents. I asked the lawyer to place the money in a trust. I told him I'd manage on my own until I came of age. He looked at me with the kind of pity I despised most. I transferred to a new school. Rented a one-room apartment. Started over with nothing but my suitcase and a mountain of grief I didn't know how to carry. Thought I was strong, brave even. But strength meant nothing when you had a fever so bad you couldn't stand, when your vision blurred and the medicine cabinet was empty. I still remember it. That dizzying crawl down the stairwell. The harsh burn of the fever and the bite of the cold air outside. And then, him. Jace Bennett. He walked toward me through a narrow, dim hallway, the backlight from the setting sun catching the edges of his hair. His silhouette cut through the fog in my brain like some strange miracle. I barely saw his face before my knees buckled and I collapsed straight into his arms. When I came to, I was in a warm bed that didn't smell like bleach or loneliness. A cold towel rested on my forehead and someone was holding my wrist, checking my pulse. Jace's mom, Helen Bennett, sat on the edge of the bed. When she saw my eyes flutter open, she smiled. That was the beginning of everything. I was sick for nearly 2 weeks. The kind of sickness that strips you down and humbles you. I could barely move and every breath felt like a punishment. But during those days, Jace never left my side. He lived just across the hall and somehow I ended up in their guest room, blanketed in warmth I hadn't known in months. His parents welcomed me with quiet grace. They didn't treat me like a burden or a charity case. Helen fed me soup and talked to me like I mattered. Richard smiled and asked about school. It had been so long since someone looked at me like I was more than just a tragedy. After I got better, Jace dragged me outside one afternoon. We sat on the lawn in front of the apartment complex, letting the sun burn away the shadows that had clung to me. He looked over and grinned. "Leah," he said, eyes sparkling, "I'm your lifesaver. You owe me." I laughed, an honest belly-deep sound. "Well then, my lifesaver, how do I repay you?" He blushed so deeply I thought his ears might catch fire. I'll let you know. We became desk mates after I transferred schools. Jace was brilliant, top of the class, popular without trying. He had this quiet confidence that never tipped into arrogance. Anytime I was stuck on a problem, he'd lean over and explain it with such patience that even my frustration melted. I fell in love with him somewhere between those lessons. And I truly believed, that he loved me just as much. But people change. Love fades. The thing about warmth is that you only realize how much you needed it when the cold returns. And when it does, it cuts deeper than before. I woke from that memory with a hollow ache in my chest. The hotel room was dim, the clock blinking into the late afternoon. I rolled over and checked my phone. Over 100 missed messages. The notifications piled like debris, broken concern, shallow curiosity, well-meaning guilt. Leah, what happened? 12 years. And you just walked away. You and Jace were everyone's favorite couple. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Then his name flashed on the screen. Jace. Incoming call. I stared at it for a long time before answering. Where are you? He demanded. 3 words. So. But the impatience was unmistakable. Like I was the one being irrational. Like he had no idea what he'd done. He used to say my name like it was something precious. Now it sounded like a burden. What is this supposed to mean, Leah? He spat, voice rising. 12 years. And you humiliate me in front of everyone? You walked out of the dinner like it was a joke. Who are you trying to impress? I didn't say anything. Just let him unravel. You've always been dramatic. I should have known. If I had, I never would have. He stopped. The weight of what he was about to say clung in the silence. Never would have saved me? I asked, tone sharper than I meant. He exhaled hard. Look, I'm coming over tonight. We're going to talk. There's nothing left to talk about. 12 years, he said, voice suddenly low. We need to give it an ending, don't we? I squeezed time out of my schedule just to marry you, Leah. And this is how you repay me. I closed my eyes, every word slicing deeper than the last. You wanted to get married, he sneered. I agreed. What more do you want from me? That was the moment I knew. I had mistaken obligation for love. Settling for tolerance and calling it warmth. Forget it, I said quietly. I'll save you the time. Leah Morgan, he growled. You think marriage is a joke? If we're not getting married, don't you ever bring it up again. I smiled bitterly. There won't be an again. He hung up. No apology. No remorse. Just pride and indignation dressed up as pain. I stared at the ceiling and let the silence swallow me. But no tears came. Not this time. I had cried enough. Now all that was left was the dull echo of goodbye. Not the kind you scream in rage. But the kind you whisper, after years of staying far too long. The next morning I left the hotel and walked toward nowhere in particular. The summer heat pressed down, heavy and unmoving. The streets buzzed with life, but I drifted through it like a ghost, invisible and strangely calm. Maybe that was what happened when the storm had already passed inside you. The world outside could thunder and crack all it wanted. Inside I was silent. I ended up at a small tea shop Jace and I used to frequent years ago, before we were anything more than students with oversized dreams and no idea how cruel time could be. I sat alone by the window and remembered a different summer. A blistering July full of sweat, tutoring flyers and quiet promises. Jace had always been brilliant, the kind of student who made teachers beam and classmates jealous. He'd been accepted to one of the top universities with a full scholarship. I still remember the acceptance letter in his hands, the light in his eyes. Helen had cried when he told her. Richard, recovering from surgery, had managed a faint smile. But that same night everything changed. The medical expenses had buried the Bennetts in debt. Richard needed long-term care and Helen's part-time job wasn't enough to keep up with it all. Despite the scholarship, the cost of living, travel, books, it was too much. I remember standing in the Bennett kitchen watching Jace stare at the floor like it held answers he didn't want to speak aloud. Then he looked up and said, "It's okay. I'll work. I can go later." Helen tried to protest but he just smiled, too mature for his age. "Dad needs us. I'll take care of everything." He said it like it was simple. Like giving up his dream didn't matter. Later that night I found him sitting on the apartment balcony, knees pulled up to his chest, the summer wind ruffling his hair. The skyline shimmered in the distance, mocking us with all the things we couldn't reach. "I'm a little rich girl now, remember?" I said softly, sitting beside him. "Shouldn't I repay my lifesaver?" He looked at me startled. "Leah, no." "Why not?" "I'm not taking your money." "Why?" "Because," he said almost sharply, "I'm not that kind of man." And that was it. The line. I was trying to love him but all he saw was charity. We fought. Quietly at first. But the words kept piling up like kindling until everything caught fire. I accused him of pride. He accused me of pity. And in the end both of us were just hurting. The moon was high by the time we stopped speaking. My throat burned. His jaw was tight. But I loved him too much to let pride win. So I gave in. "Hey," I said. "No money. But I'm still helping." I started part-time work the next week. Jace had already begun tutoring. His academic record made him a hot commodity among nervous parents trying to push their kids into Ivy League futures. At first things looked hopeful. We scheduled our days around each other. Study, work, ramen, sleep, repeat. The grind felt worth it. The struggle shared. I thought, if this is what our future will be like, I can do it. But the world doesn't like to see people happy for long. One of Jace's students, a 7-year-old boy with a mop of curls and a manipulative streak, threw a tantrum mid-session. He didn't want to do his math homework. When his mother asked why, he said, "Mr. Jace scolded me and grabbed my wrist really hard." It was a lie. A stupid, flimsy lie. But it spread like wildfire. In a week, all his tutoring gigs were gone. I found him in the park the day he lost his last client. He was sitting on a bench under the shade of a drooping tree, fingers gripping his lesson plans like they were the only thing tethering him to reality. "It's okay," I said gently, touching his shoulder. "Let's deliver food together. If that doesn't work out, we can pass out flyers." He pulled me into a hug so tight it made my ribs ache. His scent, faint jasmine and citrus, lingered on his shirt. "I'm sorry, Leah," he whispered. "I'll make it up to you. I swear I will." That whole summer we worked ourselves to the bone. The kind of sweat and struggle that left you with blisters and sunburns. But even then I didn't mind. Because we were together. Because he still looked at me like I was his person. And I believed every word he said. Back in the present, the waiter brought over my green tea. I stared down at it and let out a bitter chuckle. Green tea. What a coincidence. A few weeks after Richard's surgery, Helen fell ill too. Stress, exhaustion, untreated hypertension. It wasn't serious, but the bills piled up again. I didn't hesitate. I paid the hospital fees without telling anyone. When the surgery was done, the doctor came out with a relieved smile. "Everything went well," he told us. Jace, who had been sitting slumped over, suddenly stood up. His eyes locked onto mine. "Thank you," he said slowly, voice raw. "Really? Thank you." I smiled and hugged him. "We're family. Don't be so formal." He held me like he didn't want to let go. For a moment it felt like nothing had changed. Later that evening in the hospital room I met her for the first time. Finally. Her hair was up in a fluffy bun. She wore a pastel yellow blouse and soft ballet flats. Her smile was bright, too bright. "Hi, Uncle Richard," she said sweetly, setting down a basket of fruit. "Are you feeling better today?" Jace stepped in. "This is Sienna. She's a junior. We're working on a research project together." Helen's expression didn't shift, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. A subtle scan from head to toe. Sienna turned to Helen with perfect enthusiasm. "Auntie, I brought some soup. My mom made it. It's good for recovery." Jace chuckled. "Her mom's cooking is really good." Sienna's gaze shifted just a little. Her eyes found Jace and softened. Intent. I saw it. The gleam of something more than admiration. "And Jace?" He didn't look away. She stayed for over 20 minutes chatting with everyone, ignoring me completely. When she finally left, I stepped out to speak with the doctor. On my way back, I caught a snippet of conversation just outside the room. "Jace," Helen's voice was low but firm, "what's going on between you and that girl?" He paused. I could imagine the expression on his face, startled, cautious. "Nothing," he said quickly. "We're just friends. Don't overthink it." Helen sighed, relieved. "Good. You must never let Leah down." He didn't say anything after that. Just a quiet, "Don't worry, Mom." But in that silence, something settled into the space between us. A tiny splinter. Invisible. But deadly if left long enough. There's a kind of silence that doesn't soothe. One that's so loud it swallows you whole. That was the silence that started growing between Jace and me. It didn't arrive with screaming or slammed doors. It came with missed text. With half-hearted smiles. With his back turned to me in bed. It was the quiet that echoed after all the laughter was gone. And Sienna? She became a fixture. At first, she was just the junior from his research group. Then she was the one bringing food to his office. Then the one sitting too close during campus events. Then the one who knew how he liked his coffee, how he hated eggplant, how he needed silence to concentrate. How did she learn all of that? Because Jace told her. And somehow he stopped telling me. It started with his phone. Jace used to leave it everywhere. Face up on the kitchen counter, on the couch, even on the bathroom sink. He was never secretive. Until he was. One evening I walked in with takeout and saw him smiling at his screen, laughing quietly. It was the kind of laugh he used to save for me. I leaned over, curious. What's so funny? He jumped like I'd startled him, quickly locking his phone. Oh, nothing. Just a meme. A meme. Right. He turned away and changed the subject. But his ears were red. I let it go. That time. But it kept happening. He would turn off his screen the second I walked into the room. Step outside to take calls. Text under the table. Whisper into his AirPods while pretending to listen to music. I started hearing Sienna's name more often. Always casually. She handled the presentation edits. Sienna stayed behind to help sort data. Sienna said something hilarious in the lab today. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Like she lived in a part of his world that I no longer belonged to. One night while he slept, I broke my own heart. I told myself not to. I told myself I was above it. But pain makes you reckless. He was snoring lightly beside me when I reached for his phone. His lock code hadn't changed. The chat was pinned. Finally. Sienna, good morning, sleepyhead son, you better not be in bed again today. Sienna, I'm going to the park with my classmates. We'll send cute pics later. Sienna, remember that camping trip? You napped next to me for 3 hours, all sleeping face. Fo. There were no sext. No confessions of love. But there were green tea emojis, teasing banter, pet names hidden as jokes. There were shared secrets, jokes I didn't understand, photos of her smiling up at the camera. Camera I now knew Jace was holding. She wrote him like he was hers. And he never stopped her. But the message that broke me? Sienna, I'm craving pepper steak with green peppers. Didn't you say you're amazing at that? Jace, of course. Chef Jace at your service. Smiling face with sunglasses. Sienna, yay. Can I have it for lunch tomorrow? Jace, only if you promise not to cry when it's spicy face with tears of joy. Pepper steak with green peppers. My favorite. My birthday dish. The one thing he used to cook for me even during our most broke days. He'd say, for you? Only the best. I shut the phone quietly and lay back down numb. I didn't sleep that night. Just stared at the ceiling, wondering when it happened. When something meant only for me, became shared. My birthday arrived the next day. I waited for a message. For a kiss. For anything. Nothing came. I stared at the reservation I'd made, his favorite restaurant, the one near campus with the outdoor fairy lights and terrible parking. I'd even ordered a mini cake. His name was written next to mine on the card. When I called him in the evening, his voice was rushed. Leah. Shit. I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. Things are so hectic lately. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You said you'd be back tonight. I can't. I have data to analyze. I'll make it up to you. I wanted to scream. But I just said, okay, and hung up. Then I packed the birthday meal I had made and walked toward his department. It began to rain as I neared the campus. Not a drizzle, a torrential downpour. I didn't have an umbrella. My clothes clung to my skin, cold and heavy. The paper bag I carried sagged in my hands, threatening to rip. Still I kept walking. Then I saw them. Jace and Sienna. He had her on his back, her arms looped around his shoulders, laughing as he carried her over a flooded path. He held an umbrella in one hand, protecting her from the rain. Her cheek rested against his. His face was filled with concern. Tenderness. I stopped walking. Watched from behind a tree like a stranger peering into someone else's life. He turned his head to look at her. She smiled. They shared a look I hadn't seen on his face in months. I called his phone. He pulled it out, glanced at it. And then Sienna took it from him and hit end call. My name on the screen disappeared. Just like that. My fingers loosened and the soaked bag slipped to the pavement. The box inside opened, smearing frosting and crushed steak across the concrete. A birthday meal for two. Ruined in the rain. Just like us. That night, as I sat shivering on the curb outside campus, I realized something. 12 years of love might look like an oak tree, strong-rooted, enduring. But it only takes one termite. One steady intrusion. One soft betrayal repeated enough times. To hollow everything out from within. I didn't go home. I didn't cry. I just sat there cold and alone until the rain stopped. Then I stood up and walked toward a future I hadn't planned. One without him. The rain hadn't stopped the next morning. It drizzled in waves, soft, persistent, like the sky was grieving with me. I stood under a small awning outside Helen Bennett's apartment building, a white envelope in my hand. The card inside held no accusations, no apologies. Just simple words and a gift card to her favorite tea house. A quiet thank you. A quiet goodbye. Helen had always been kind to me. From the moment she tucked that cold towel on my forehead when I was 16, I'd thought of her like a second mother. And now, despite how things ended between Jace and me, I needed her to know the difference. That my love for her, for what we once had, was real. I slipped the envelope through the mail slot and turned to leave. But fate never likes quiet exits. Jace's car screeched to a halt beside me, splashing rainwater across my shoes. He jumped out, soaked and furious. "Leah Morgan," he barked, striding over. "What the hell is this?" He shoved the envelope into my chest. "That's for your mom," I said evenly. "Don't make a scene." "A tea card? Really? Is this your idea of a breakup fee?" I didn't answer. "Do you think money solves everything?" His voice was raw, eyes red-rimmed. "I didn't expect it to," I replied. "It was respect. For the woman who treated me like a daughter for 12 years. He laughed bitterly. "You're unbelievable." "No, Jace. What's unbelievable is how quickly you became someone I couldn't recognize." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "I tolerated being made a joke at our family dinner, Leah. Don't test me further." "Test you?" My voice cracked. "I was the one holding on while you slipped away. I was the one still believing in us when you were already somewhere else." He was breathing hard now, his fists clenched. "I gave you everything." I shook my head. "No, Jace. You gave me just enough to keep me hoping. Just enough to stop me from walking away sooner." He flinched. "Just barely." Then said quietly, "Are you serious? You're really ending 12 years, like this?" "I already ended it," I whispered. "You just didn't notice." Flashback. 2 years ago. We were both fresh graduates. He wanted to stay on for a master's degree. I had job offers lined up in 3 cities. "I'll start working," I told him one night, curled beside him on the couch. "Support us while you study." He pulled away slightly. "No, I'll work. You should keep studying." "I already have a degree." He paused, then smiled thinly. "Besides, jobs are hard to find right now. You'll probably struggle." I blinked. "You think I can't get hired?" He gave a small chuckle and rubbed my arm. "It's not about you. It's just reality." But I saw it in his eyes. The doubt. The subtle patronizing edge. I got up, determined. "Then I'll prove you wrong." That was our first serious fight after college. He said I was stubborn. I said he was insecure. He walked out furious, slammed the door. And I chased him. I couldn't let him go. I had already lost too many people. I ran barefoot through the street, calling his name. The last thing I remember was the blinding headlights. When I opened my eyes again, the ceiling was unfamiliar. My body ached everywhere. My right leg was in a cast. Tubes ran from my arms. Jace was beside me. Tears stained his cheeks. "Leah," he choked. "You're awake." "Thank God." I tried to speak. My lips cracked. All I managed was, "Hey." He gripped my hand, trembling. "I'm so sorry. I was such an idiot. I never should have walked out." "It wasn't your fault," I whispered. "But maybe it was. Maybe we both were." He held me like I was the most fragile thing in the world. "If I ever lost you," he said, his voice breaking, "I'd never forgive myself." And like a fool I believed him. That's when she walked in. Cass Monroe. Short hair, leather jacket, nervous eyes. She stepped up awkwardly, then said with quiet confidence, "Hi. I'm the one who hit you. I'm so sorry. But I tried to break in time." Jace stood defensive. "It was an accident." Cass nodded. I wanted to meet her. To apologize properly." I shook my head weakly. "It's okay." Cass smiled through her guilt. "If you ever need anything, anything at all." Her words faded, but her name didn't. Cass Monroe. She'd changed my life more than I could ever imagine that day. Back to present. Jace's voice pulled me from the memory. "Do you still love me?" he asked softly. I looked up at him. "Of course I did. I loved you so much it nearly killed me." He stepped forward. "Then don't leave." I stared at him, wet and angry and desperate. And I realized he loved the version of me who bent for him. The one who forgave easily. Who stayed. Not the one who finally walked away. "I'm not leaving," I said gently. "I've already left." I turned and walked away, not looking back once. That was the day I chose myself. Not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to give someone who only took and never looked back. Recovery was a strange kind of limbo. Your body heals faster than your heart, and everyone around you thinks the worst is over. That you're okay just because you can walk again, smile again, make small talk again. But I wasn't okay. Not really. After the accident, I moved slower. Slept lighter. Thought deeper. Jace had gone from overprotective to vaguely distracted again. His guilt had faded, replaced by a cautious resentment I couldn't name at the time. That was also when Cass Monroe reappeared. It started with a knock at my door. I was home alone, sipping ginger tea and flipping through a business magazine I'd found in the hospital waiting room. Cass stood there in jeans and a blazer holding a folder. "Hi," she said almost sheepishly. "I know this is weird, but I wanted to talk to you about something." I raised a brow, surprised. "Come in." She sat awkwardly at the kitchen counter while I made her a cup of coffee. "I know I hit you. And I know that's not the best way to start a partnership," she began, smiling faintly. "But after the accident, I looked into your background." My eyes narrowed. "You investigated me?" "No, God no. I Googled you. You've done amazing things. Your projects, your articles, your grad thesis. You're sharp." I sipped my tea. "And I'm starting a company," she continued. "Mechanical tech design. Sustainable prototypes, product development, niche market tools. I need someone who thinks structurally. You were top in our field." I laughed. "I'm recovering from a car accident." Cass shrugged. "So what? You still have a brain. You still have ideas." There was something bold about her, unapologetically direct but not pushy. She handed me the folder. Inside was a pitch deck. Raw but ambitious. I read it twice that night. Then a third time the next morning. And I called her. Cass and I weren't an obvious match. She was all fire and risk. I was measured and strategic. But where she burned hot, I brought clarity. Where I hesitated, she jumped. We built something from nothing. Late nights. Ugly tears. Investor meetings that went nowhere. Prototype failures. Revisions. More revisions. But we kept going. I'd never felt more alive. Jace didn't understand it. At first he said nothing. Then he laughed. "That's cute. Your little post-recovery project." "It's not a project," I replied calmly. "It's a business." He scoffed. "You've always liked pretending you're a CEO." I stared at him, stunned. "I'm not pretending, Jace. This is real." He just smirked and buried himself back in his laptop. From that moment on, I stopped telling him about the milestones. About the deals we closed. About the patents we filed. What was the point? He wasn't listening. But I kept building anyway. Cass and I worked around the clock. When our third prototype went viral in a niche online forum, we landed our first investor. Then a small grant. Then a startup competition. We moved from my dining table to a shared office space. From ramen and black coffee to catered boardrooms and business cards. And I was happy. Really happy. But with every step forward, Jace moved one step back. He started coming home late. Stopped asking how my day was. Stopped looking at me entirely. I thought he was busy with grad school. But when I'd ask about his research, he'd just say, "It's fine," and brush me off. The silence returned. But this time I didn't chase it. I was too tired. Too fulfilled in other areas to beg for affection from someone who no longer saw me. One night we both got home at the same time. I walked in carrying blueprints and a coffee in each hand. He walked in holding takeout and looked surprised to see me. "I thought you were out late," he said. "I came back early," I replied, setting my files down. "Investor meeting got moved." He glanced at my things, then nodded at the coffee cups. "You bring one for me?" I blinked. "No. It's for Cass." "Of course," he muttered under his breath. I stared at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just funny how you always have time for her." I paused. "Cass is my business partner." "Sure. And I'm just your fiancé. Doesn't mean much, does it?" That stung. More than it should have. Later that night we lay in bed, backs to each other. Not touching. Not talking. It had become routine. I stared at the ceiling, wondering when we'd stopped being us. When his hands stopped reaching for mine in the dark. When we stopped making weekend plans or sharing dumb videos or even arguing. Even the fights were gone. Just silence. In the middle of the night, I got up and tiptoed to the living room. I opened my laptop and stared at the blueprint Cass and I had been revising. It looked beautiful. Simple. Clean. Strong. Exactly how I wanted my life to be. A strange thought came to me as I sat there under the soft glow of the desk lamp. Maybe Jace loved me more when I was small. Soft. Dependent. Not like this. Not when I stood on my own. Not when I stopped asking for permission. And if that was the case, then maybe I never really had his love. Only his comfort. The day I returned to the Bennett house felt strangely ceremonial. Like closing a door that had been left cracked open for far too long. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. Jace had called a few days earlier, voice low and strange. Mom says some of your things are still here. You should come get them. It was a peace offering wrapped in practicality. But I knew what was waiting. Not just my things, but expectations, guilt, and a room full of people who didn't know the half of what had really happened. Helen opened the door with a soft, weary smile. Leah. She looked older. Thinner. Her warm eyes had dulled with stress. Come in. Dinner's almost ready. I hadn't agreed to dinner. I'd only come to collect a few boxes. But as I stepped inside, I heard voices from the dining room. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family. They were all here. I followed the scent of roasted duck and steamed rice to the table, and there it was. A perfectly set meal, too many chairs, too many expectations. Jace was seated at the far end, head bowed, silent. Everyone else glanced up, their eyes flicking between us with barely concealed curiosity. Helen motioned for me to sit. I did, more out of politeness than compliance. The meal began with small talk. Hollow pleasantries about weather, traffic, how thin I'd gotten. Then came the first strike. Leah, said one of Jace's aunts, setting down her chopsticks. We've always thought you two were a perfect match. What happened, dear? I sipped my tea. We grew apart. She'd said softly. After 12 years? That's not growing apart, that's giving up. Another relative jumped in, a cousin I barely remembered. It's just a rough patch, right? Jace has told us he made mistakes. But don't you think it's time to forgive? And then, as women, isn't what we all want just a good home? I let the words pass over me, not in silence but in stillness. Calm. Controlled. Until one of the uncles spoke with that familiar sting of entitlement. You're doing well now, we heard. Own a company. Busy life. But still, Jace was with you since high school. Held you up when you had no one. How can you just walk away from that? That's when I smiled. Just a small, sharp curve of my lips. I'm glad we're talking openly, I said. Because I've been quiet for too long. The room quieted. I didn't leave Jace because I stopped loving him. I left because I realized he stopped loving me, long before I even noticed. Someone started to protest, but I raised my hand. Let me finish. I opened my bag and laid out 3 printed photographs. Photo 1. Sienna sitting beside Jace on a park bench, feeding him from a lunchbox. Pepper steak with green peppers. By birthday, I said calmly. He said he was busy with data. This is what he was actually doing. Photo 2. Sienna clinging to his arm outside an art gallery. The day I went to pick our wedding venue. He told me he was at a conference. Photo 3. A candid of the two of them on a Ferris wheel. Close. Laughing. Almost kissing. That weekend, I was home picking centerpieces. He said he was tired. Gasps filled the room. Chopsticks dropped. Helen stared at the photos as if they burned. One aunt muttered, "Photos can be fake." "They're from Sienna's public friend circle," I cut in. "No investigations. No snooping. She wanted me to see them." I turned to Jace. "Tell them I'm lying." He stared at the table, face drained of color. Helen rose to her feet. Then, before anyone could move, thump. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. Jace flinched, hand to his cheek. A red mark bloomed fast. "You humiliated her," Helen said, voice shaking. 12 years, and this is how you repay her?" Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at me. "Yeah, I'm so sorry. I raised him better than this." I stood slowly. "You did. This isn't on you, Helen." She reached for my hand. "Don't go. Please. I'll make him apologize properly. Oh, Auntie, I said softly, you gave me kindness when no one else did. I'll never forget that. But I can't stay where I'm no longer seen. Jace stood then, breath shallow. Leah, please. I looked at him, really looked. Not at the boy who once carried me out of sickness, but the man who now couldn't look me in the eyes. You didn't cheat with your body, I said. But you cheated with your heart. You gave her the parts of you that used to belong to me. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. I stepped back. You want to know if I can walk away from 12 years? I pointed at the photos. You walked first. The room remained frozen as I left. No one followed. Except Helen, who hugged me tightly at the door. If I ever need anything, she whispered, call me. Always. I nodded. I won't change my number. Back outside, the air felt lighter. Like something heavy had lifted off my chest. 12 years. 12 birthdays. 12 versions of myself waiting at windows for a man who no longer saw me. Now finally I wasn't waiting anymore. The knock on my apartment door came on a rainy Wednesday night. Sharp, urgent, and unexpected. I almost didn't open it. But something inside me, curiosity maybe or closure, pulled my hand toward the doorknob. And there he was. Jace Bennett. Hair damp. Jacket clinging to him like it was the only thing he had left. His eyes were hollow, sunken, rimmed with red. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Leah, he whispered, voice cracked and barely there. Please. I stepped back silently, letting the door swing open. He entered slowly, like he was walking into a dream he no longer believed in. I don't know where else to go, he said as he sat at the edge of the couch. I've been walking for hours. I poured him tea. Not because I wanted to comfort him, but because my kindness wasn't something I could just turn off. He took the cup in trembling hands. And then, without warning, he pulled out his phone, scrolled, and turned the screen toward me. It showed Sienna's contact. He tapped delete contact. Then block. Then he looked up. She's gone. I didn't respond. I swear to you, Leah, there was nothing physical. But I liked how she looked at me. I felt admired. I set my tea down, calm as ever. You liked being worshipped, I said. He flinched. I was too busy building a life for us, I added. And she made you feel important for doing nothing. He looked ashamed but not surprised. I only ever loved you, he said quietly. Maybe, I replied. But did you respect me? Silence. The kind that tells you everything. I made mistakes, he said. I know, I replied. I'll do anything. No. He blinked. What? I don't want you back, Jace. But it wasn't just Sienna. It was every moment after. Every time you saw me shining and shrank from it. Every time I needed you and you turned away. I was insecure. I know. But I can't be your cure. He looked stunned. Why are you so calm? He asked. Because I'd already grieved. Long before he showed up on my doorstep. I mourned you while you were still standing beside me, I said softly. Now there's nothing left to feel. He sat in silence for a long time. Then he left, shoulders hunched, shoes squelching in the rain. I didn't watch him go. A week later I got a message from my senior. You heard about Sienna? I hadn't. So she told me. Apparently, Sienna had fallen for a married man. A senior researcher with a family and a well-known wife. She repeated the same tactics. Midnight texts. Flirty voice notes. Subtle physical contact. Playing innocent. But this time the man's wife fought back. Hard. She printed every message, every selfie, every voice memo. Then she plastered them across the neighborhood, the university, the lab bulletin board. And finally, she rented a van with speakers and blared a recording of Sienna's voice messages in a public square for hours. Dr. Zhao, I miss your scent. You're different from your wife. You're special. I wish I could be your morning every day. The scandal was explosive. Her parents pulled her out of school. They moved overnight. No one knew where. I read all this with a strange detachment. There was no satisfaction. No glee. No revenge-colored relief. Just nothing. Like watching a story unfold on TV. Far away. Someone else's life. That girl had once shattered mine with a smile and a tilted head. Now she had been crushed beneath her own games. And Jace? He was quiet now. No more texts. No more calls. He disappeared from my radar completely. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he finally saw himself clearly. But I didn't care anymore. Because I had moved on. Not to another man. Not to another love. But to something more permanent. My own peace. The apartment wasn't big. 2 rooms, tall windows, white walls I hadn't bothered to decorate yet. But it was mine. There were no ghosted frames on the shelves. No shoes that weren't mine by the door. No shared drawers. No toothbrush standing next to mine in the holder. And still somehow it felt more full than anywhere I'd lived in years. Because here I could finally breathe. The move to the new city had been impulsive on the surface. But in truth I'd been planning it for months. Ever since I realized I was building a future Jace wasn't meant to be in. Cass had supported me entirely. Our company had expanded faster than either of us expected, and I had taken the chance to open a satellite office here. She stayed back to manage the headquarters and I brought on a small team, just 3 people all hungry, smart and free from my past. The work kept me busy. Grounded. Alive. But the quiet moments? Those were the ones that surprised me most. I had braced myself for the ache. For the silence of an empty apartment, the echo of footsteps that were only mine. But there was no ache. Only peace. On a breezy Sunday, my old university friends came by for a casual housewarming. They brought wine, homemade pasta, and that familiar mix of teasing and warmth that had gotten us all through finals and heartbreaks alike. We sat on the floor, cross-legged and tipsy, laughing over college stories. One of them, Julie, nudged me mid-laugh. "You know what's weird?" she said. I looked at her, sipping from my wine glass. "What?" "You're glowing." I laughed. "Stop." "No, really," she insisted. "It's like, you've finally exhaled." I smiled quietly, looking around at my minimalist space. No traces of anyone but me. "I guess I have." We didn't talk about Jace much. Only once in passing. "Is he still around?" someone asked. I shrugged. "I don't know." Because I didn't. Not really. Rumors said he'd withdrawn after the scandal. That he hadn't dated again. That his thesis advisor dropped him for misconduct. That he'd deferred graduation. But those were just rumors. And I wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. That night, after everyone left and the dishes were done, I stood by the window. City lights sparkled below. The breeze lifted the hem of my robe as I held a cup of tea to my chest and stared out at the skyline. It looked nothing like the place where I first met Jace. But it felt like the place where I finally met myself. 12 years. That's what I gave him. 12 birthdays. 12 winters. 12 versions of myself. I wasn't angry anymore. Because I had loved him. Deeply, truly, with the kind of purity you only get once in life. And for a time he loved me too. But love alone isn't enough. Not when it's used as a leash. Not when it keeps you small so someone else can feel tall. If Jace ever thinks of me now, I hope he remembers the girl who packed his lunch before finals. The girl who dragged herself through fever just to make it to his graduation. The girl who built a home and left the light on for years. And I hope he knows I turned off that light not out of cruelty, but because I finally knew he wasn't coming back as the man I needed. As for Sienna, she vanished from the public eye. Her family moved cities, some said even countries. I never saw her again. Never needed to. I think somewhere deep down she wasn't the villain of my story. She was just the spark that made the truth burn faster. Jace chose to light the match. Now the only name on my doorbell is mine. The only dreams I build are mine. The only heart I have to protect is mine. And it is quiet here. But not lonely. Because peace is louder than heartbreak, if you give it time to speak. I stepped out onto the balcony, the night air curling around me like a hug. I took a deep breath. And smiled. Not for anyone else. Just for me. The end.